Get ready for the dictation on the count of 3, 2, 1, start. For 30 years, Omar al-Bashir, a former military officer, ruled Sudan with an iron hand and indiscriminate violence. When he was toppled in April 2019 in a mass uprising, many hoped that the resource-rich country in the Horn of Africa would finally get a chance to move towards a freer society with a representative and responsive administration. But the tragedy of Sudan is that the monstrous regime that Mr. Bashir built outlasted his reign. Within 2 years of his fall, the military was back, and now a power struggle between the top two generals has pushed Sudan to the brink of a civil war. Dozens of civilians have already been killed in fighting that broke out on Saturday in Khartoum and other parts of the country between the military and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF), a notorious paramilitary group. Despite international calls for truce, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the military chief as well as the head of the Sovereignty Council, the Transitional Administration, and his deputy Lieutenant General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who commands the RSF, have refused to negotiate, blaming each other for the attacks. Mr. Dagalo, who has close ties with Russia's Wagner private military company and Saudi Arabia, claims that the RSF has taken control of the presidential palace and has vowed to bring General Burhan to justice, while the military has dismissed such claims and launched air strikes against RSF sites. Just 2 years ago, the two generals stood hand in hand when they ousted a civilian transition government and took over the reins of the country. Faced with international isolation and domestic pressure, they agreed to transfer power back to the civilians. But differences emerged on who should control the post-transition military. General Burhan supports the integration of the RSF into the regular military and transition to civilian government to take place in 2 years, while General Dagalo, who fears that he would lose his clout, wants to delay it by 10 years. Discord grew into mistrust, and mistrust led to fighting. And the fighting could drag the country, which has a history of internal strife, into an all-out civil war. Sudan's generals are known for their scant regard for the welfare of their people. The country is struggling with an economic crisis with rocketing inflation and a burning hunger problem. The last thing Sudan wants now is a civil war. If the priority of the generals is to address Sudan's basic problems, they should pay attention to the call for a truce and dialogue and commit themselves to a timeline-sensitive democratic transition. Decades of military rule in Sudan have resulted in a lot of atrocities. Generals Burhan and Dagalo should not tread the same course. To interdine sanction to the Nagaland police to prosecute 30 army men for the December 2021 killing of 13 civilians in a botched-up operation. The Union government has sent out a disconcerting message that it is unable or unwilling to do anything about impunity in insurgency-hit states. In what was later described as a case of mistaken identity, 6 workers returning home in a vehicle from a coal mine bordering Assam were gunned down by the security forces at Oting village in Mon district. 7 more villagers were shot dead later following a scuffle with villagers who had found the bodies in an army vehicle. Prior sanction to prosecute army personnel is necessary under Section 6 of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act AFSPA. A special investigation team of the Nagaland police completed its probe in March 2022 and filed a charge sheet in the case. It had sought sanction for prosecution from the Defense Ministry's Department of Military Affairs. The police had claimed they had established the involvement of 30 personnel who allegedly violated standard operating procedures and rules of engagement and resorted to indiscriminate and disproportionate firing on the vehicle. Meanwhile, the army also ordered a court of inquiry, but its outcome is not known. On petitions by the wives of the army personnel involved, the Supreme Court of India stayed the criminal proceedings in July 2022. The center has been quite keen on reducing the areas covered by the law, giving special powers in disturbed areas to the armed forces. In recognition of the significant improvement in the security situation in the northeastern region, it has reduced the notified areas in Nagaland, Assam, and Manipur in recent years. On the political side, it has been working towards peace accords and getting insurgents and extremists to lay down arms. However, it is quite incongruent with its overall policy of creating an atmosphere conducive for peace and development and making partners out of those laying down weapons for the government to disallow the prosecution of those suspected to be involved in an admittedly mistaken counter-insurgency operation. It would have redounded to the government's credit had it allowed the criminal courts to decide on the extent of culpability of the army men. Prosecution of armed forces personnel involved in excesses is quite rare, leading to the widespread impression that AFSPA is used to promote impunity. The government must demonstrate its commitment to peace in the region and justice for the victims by either granting sanction for their prosecution or taking exemplary action based on the findings of the military court of inquiry.